The stars around Kepler station burned with their usual cold light when the Vraxian fleet arrived. The station was a massive wheel of metal and glass that spun slowly in the darkness of space. Inside, 30,000 people lived and worked. Most of them were humans. But there were also Telkari merchants with their 4 arms, Bendix engineers with their scaled skin, and even a few Vraxian traders who had made the station their second home. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the main control room, drinking her morning coffee and watching the ships come and go through the docking bays. It was a normal day. Cargo vessels brought metals from the mining colonies. Passenger ships carried families moving to new worlds. Everything was peaceful. Then the sensors started screaming. "Captain, we have 12 Vraxian warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel," the sensor officer shouted. His hands moved quickly over his console. "They're in battle formation." Sarah put down her coffee. Her heart started beating faster. "Hail them. Ask them what they want." The communication officer tried to make contact, but the Vraxian ships did not answer. They moved closer to the station. Their weapons were powered up and ready to fire. Sarah could see them on the main screen. Huge ships that looked like floating fortresses made of black metal and red lights. "Send a distress signal to Earth," Sarah ordered. "Tell them we have Vraxian warships approaching with hostile intent." But Earth was 6 days away at the fastest speed. No help would come in time. Finally, the Vraxian fleet commander appeared on the screen. He was tall and covered in thick armor that made him look like a walking tank. His face had 4 eyes that glowed yellow in the darkness. His name was Admiral Krenthox, and his voice sounded like grinding stones. "Kepler Station. You are suspected of harboring weapons that violate Galactic Council law," he said. "We will conduct a security sweep. Do not resist." Sarah felt cold fear in her stomach. "Admiral, we are a civilian trade station. We have no weapons here except basic security equipment. You can send inspectors. We will cooperate fully." Admiral Krenthox did not seem to hear her. "Our sensors have detected anomalous energy signatures. We will neutralize the threat. Train. Train." "Wait!" Sarah screamed. "There are 30,000 people here. Give us time to evacuate." The screen went black. The Vraxian ships opened fire. The first missiles hit the docking bay where the cargo ships were loading. The explosion was so bright that the cameras burned out. Sarah felt the station shake, like a toy in the hands of an angry child. Alarms rang throughout the entire structure. People started screaming and running. "All personnel, evacuate immediately," Sarah shouted into the station-wide communication system. "This is not a drill. Get to the escape pods now." But there were not enough escape pods for everyone. There never had been. Nobody thought they would need them. Kepler Station was supposed to be safe. The Vraxian ships kept firing. Their weapons tore through the station's hull like paper. Sections that had been full of life just moments ago became silent and cold as the air rushed out into space. Sarah watched the casualty reports climb on her screen. 1,000 dead. 5,000. 10,000. Some people made it to the escape pods. Sarah watched them launch into space. Tiny silver spheres fleeing from the dying station. But the Vraxian ships shot some of them down. Sarah could not understand why. These were unarmed civilians, children, families. The station's main power core was hit. The lights went out. Emergency systems kicked in. But Sarah knew it was over. The station was breaking apart. She could hear the metal screaming as it twisted and tore. "Captain, we need to go," her first officer said, pulling at her arm. "There's 1 pod left." Sarah looked at her crew. There were 5 of them in the control room. The pod could hold 6 people. But outside in the corridors, she could still hear people running and crying for help. "You go," she said. "Captain, that's an order. Go now." Her crew left, running toward the last escape pod. Sarah sat down in her chair and looked at the screens. She sent one final message to Earth. Just 4 words. "Remember what they did." Then, The main reactor exploded, and Kepler Station became a cloud of debris and frozen bodies spinning in the dark. 3 days later, a human rescue ship arrived. They found the escape pods. Out of 30,000 people, only 4,000 had survived. The rescue crews floated through the debris field, finding bodies and personal belongings scattered among the twisted metal. A child's toy, a wedding ring, a photograph of a family that no longer existed. The Galactic Council met 2 weeks after the incident. The Vraxians sent Admiral Krenthox to explain what happened. He stood before the council, which was made up of representatives from 20 different alien species. His voice showed new emotion. "Our sensors detected weapons-grade materials on Kepler Station," he said. "We acted to prevent a threat to galactic security. Unfortunately, there were civilian casualties. This is regrettable, but unavoidable, in military operations." The human ambassador, David Park, stood up. His face was calm, but his hands were shaking. "You killed 26,000 people. Most of them were civilians. You gave them no time to evacuate. You shot down escape pods." The Vraxian admiral looked at him with his 4 yellow eyes. "Sensor malfunctions indicated that the escape pods were armed. We took appropriate, defensive measures." The council debated for 3 days. In the end, they issued a formal apology to humanity. They offered to pay for the reconstruction of Kepler Station. They called it an unfortunate accident, caused by technical failures and miscommunication. The Vraxian Empire would face no punishment. This was how things worked in the galaxy. The strong did what they wanted. The weak accepted it and moved on. Ambassador Park accepted the council's decision with dignity. He thanked them for their consideration. He promised that humanity would continue to be a responsible member of the galactic community. But as he left the council chambers, he sent a message to Earth. It was encrypted and marked with the highest security classification. It contained 2 sentences. "They think this is over. Begin preparations." On Earth, the message reached the desk of the Secretary-General of the United Earth Government. She read it 3 times. Then she called an emergency meeting of every nation's leaders, every corporation's executives, and every military's commanders. The meeting lasted 12 hours. When it was over, humanity was no longer divided. They had one goal now. One purpose. The Vraxians had made a terrible mistake. They had struck humanity and expected them to forget. But humanity never forgets. 3 years passed after the destruction of Kepler Station. To anyone watching, humanity seemed to have accepted their place in the galaxy. Human diplomats attended council meetings and smiled politely. Human merchants continued trading with Vraxian companies. Human scientists published research and shared discoveries with other species. But this was all a mask. Underneath the surface, humanity was preparing for something the galaxy had never seen before. On Earth, in a bunker built deep under the Rocky Mountains, General Marcus Webb stood in front of a wall covered with screens. Each screen showed a different part of the plan. He had not seen his family in 2 years. He had not slept more than 4 hours a night since Kepler Station died. But his eyes were sharp and focused. "Give me the status report," he said to his staff. Major Lisa Torres stepped forward with her tablet. "Project Longbow is at 92% completion. We now have complete maps of every Vraxian military base, supply depot, and communication relay. Our infiltrators are in position." "Project Oracle?" Webb asked. "We have cracked their military encryption codes. We can read their communications in real time. They still don't know we're inside their systems." Webb nodded. He looked at the next screen, which showed the Vraxian Empire spread across dozens of star systems. "What about Project Dominoes?" Torres smiled for the first time. "That's the beautiful part, sir. We have made contact with 17 species that the Vraxians have conquered or oppressed. We've been secretly supplying them with weapons, training, and resources. They're ready to rise up on our signal." All across human space, the preparation continued. In shipyards orbiting Mars, Workers built new warships using designs that incorporated lessons from every battle humanity had ever studied. These ships did not look impressive. They were smaller than Vraxian warships and less heavily armored. But they were fast, and they were smart. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo led the team that designed the ship's combat systems. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but her mind was sharp as a knife. She had lost her daughter on Kepler Station. "The Vraxians fight like they're still in the old wars," she explained to her engineering team. "They use overwhelming force and heavy armor. They expect their enemies to stand and fight in formation. So we won't do that. Our ships will be like wolves, not bears. We'll strike fast, from unexpected angles, and disappear before they can respond." Every human colony contributed something to the effort. The miners on Europa sent rare metals for the ship's reactors. The farmers on New Texas donated food to feed the growing military. The programmers on Luna Station wrote the artificial intelligence systems that would control the attack drones. Even children helped, collecting scrap metal for recycling. But the most important work was being done by people the Vraxians never noticed. Human traders and merchants had been traveling through Vraxian space for years. Many of them were actually intelligence officers, carefully observing and recording everything they saw. They noted which Vraxian commanders were competent and which were corrupt. They identified which worlds were loyal to the Empire and which ones were resentful. They found the cracks in the Vraxian system. James Liu was one of these intelligence officers. He pretended to be a simple merchant selling human electronics. His ship was old and slow, and he always seemed friendly and harmless. The Vraxians barely looked at him when he docked at their stations, but James had a perfect memory and a gift for languages. He listened to the Vraxian soldiers complaining in bars. He befriended Vraxian workers who felt underpaid and overworked. He learned about the corruption in the Vraxian military, where officers bought their positions and promotion depended on political connections rather than skill. All of this information flowed back to Earth, where thousands of analysts studied it and looked for patterns. They built a complete picture of Vraxian society, from the highest admiral to the lowest worker. They understood how the Vraxians thought, what they feared, and what they wanted. Meanwhile, humanity was also reaching out to other species in the galaxy. Not the powerful ones who sat on the council, but the small ones, the forgotten ones, the species that the elder races barely noticed. Ambassador Chen Mei spent 3 years traveling to small worlds on the edge of galactic civilization. She met with leaders of species that had been conquered by the Vraxians generations ago. She sat in simple rooms and listened to their stories of oppression and loss. "We cannot help you openly," she told them honestly. "Not yet. But we can give you weapons. We can train your soldiers. And when the time comes, we will fight alongside you." Many of them did not believe her at first. Why would humanity help them? What did humans gain from this? But Chen Mei showed them recordings of Kepler Station's destruction. She showed them the bodies of human children floating in space. "We understand what you have suffered," she said, "and we promise you this. The galaxy is going to change. The Vraxians think they can do whatever they want with no consequences. We're going to teach them they're wrong." Slowly, carefully, a network of alliances formed in the shadows. Species that had been enemies for generations began working together, united by their common hatred of Vraxian oppression and their hope for freedom. The Vraxian intelligence services noticed none of this. They saw only what humanity wanted them to see, a species that had learned its place, that understood it was too weak to challenge the elder races. Admiral Krentox himself, the one who had destroyed Kepler Station, was promoted to fleet commander. At a celebration of his new position, he gave a speech about how humanity had been properly disciplined. "The humans learned the lesson we taught them," he said to the assembled Vraxian officers. "They understand now that they must respect the power of the Empire. This is good. We can use them. They are excellent engineers and traders. They will serve the Empire well." The Vraxian officers laughed and drank their celebration drinks. they felt secure in their power. Their fleet was the third largest in the galaxy. Their empire controlled resource-rich worlds and important trade routes. No one would dare challenge them. They did not know that human agents had recorded that speech. They did not know that human infiltrators had mapped every ship in their fleet and identified the weaknesses in their designs. They did not know that human cyber warfare specialists had already planted viruses in their military computer systems, waiting to activate. On Earth, in the bunker under the mountains, General Webb watched the recording of Admiral Krenthox's speech. He watched the Vraxian commander laugh about the death of 26,000 human beings. He watched the other officers celebrate their strength and their impunity. Webb turned to his staff. "How much longer until we're ready?" Major Torres checked her systems. "All pieces are in place, sir. We can begin operations whenever you give the order." Webb looked at the countdown clock on the wall. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days since Kepler Station died. Every one of those days had been spent preparing for this moment. "Send the message to the President," Webb said quietly. "Tell her it's time." Across the human worlds, from Earth to the furthest colonies, people received a simple notification on their devices. It was just one sentence, and most civilians did not understand what it meant. But every person who had been working on the preparation understood perfectly. The message said, "Remember, Kepler. The long wait was over. The revenge was about to begin." The attack began not with weapons, but with information. At precisely the same moment, across 17 different worlds in Vraxian space, every public screen suddenly changed. The entertainment shows and news broadcasts disappeared. In their place appeared documents, video recordings, and audio files that the Vraxian government had tried to keep secret for decades. On the Vraxian homeworld, citizens watched in shock as their screens showed recordings of their military massacring unarmed protesters on colony worlds. They saw documents proving that their supposedly democratic elections were rigged. They saw messages from their leaders joking about the stupid citizens who believed the government's lies. On the conquered worlds, the subject species saw proof that their tribute payments were not going to infrastructure and protection like they had been told. The money was going into the personal accounts of Vraxian governors and admirals. The recordings showed Vraxian officials laughing about how easy it was to steal from the conquered populations. The Vraxian government tried to shut down the broadcasts, but they could not. Human cyber warfare specialists had spent 3 years infiltrating every level of the Vraxian computer networks. Now those systems belonged to humanity, not the Vraxians. Within hours, riots began on the Vraxian homeworld. Within days, 3 conquered worlds declared their independence and rose in rebellion. The Vraxian Empire, which had seemed so strong and stable, began to shake at its foundations. But the information attack was just the beginning. In the Tertius Belt, a region of space rich with asteroids and mining operations, the Vraxian Third Fleet was on routine patrol. Admiral Vorthak commanded 27 warships, making this one of the most powerful military forces in the sector. He was not worried about the riots and rebellions. The military would crush them easily, as they always did. His communication officer suddenly looked up from his console with confusion on his face. "Admiral, we're receiving strange reports from our supply bases. They say they're under attack. But the sensors show nothing." Before Vorthak could respond, explosions lit up the darkness of space, their reactors overloading simultaneously. "Battle stations," he roared. "Find the enemy." But his sensors showed nothing. No enemy ships, no missiles, nothing. Then his weapons systems went offline. His engines stopped responding. The lights on his command ship flickered and died, replaced by emergency lighting. On his main screen, a message appeared in perfect Vraxian script. "This is for Kepler Station." Suddenly, the sensors started working again. They showed hundreds of small human ships appearing all around the Vraxian fleet. They had been there the entire time, hidden by stealth technology that the Vraxians did not know humans possessed. The human ships were tiny compared to the massive Vraxian warships, but they moved with incredible speed and precision. They darted between the Vraxian vessels like schools of fish, firing missiles that targeted specific weak points in the Vraxian armor. Every shot hit exactly where it needed to. Vorthak tried to give orders, but his communication systems were jammed. He tried to maneuver his ship, but the engines would not respond. The human infiltrators had left viruses in his systems, and now those viruses had activated, turning his own ship against him. One by one, the Vraxian warships were destroyed or disabled. The battle lasted only 23 minutes. When it was over, the Third Fleet no longer existed. Some ships were destroyed, others were drifting in space, their crews alive, but their systems completely shut down. The human ships had captured them without killing anyone unnecessarily. Admiral Vorthak floated in the wreckage of his command ship, waiting for rescue and wondering how this was possible. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be inferior. How had they done this? The news of the Third Fleet's destruction spread quickly through the galaxy. The Galactic Council was stunned. The Vraxian High Command was in chaos, and the oppressed species under Vraxian rule saw hope for the first time in generations. On the planet Kellara, the native Kellari people had been enslaved by the Vraxians for 80 years. They worked in mines and factories, producing materials for the Vraxian war machine. The Vraxian guards treated them with casual cruelty, secure in the knowledge that the Kellari were too weak and too frightened to resist. But when the news of the Third Fleet's defeat reached Kellara, everything changed. The Kellari workers walked out of the mines and factories. They went to hidden storage locations and retrieved weapons that human agents had smuggled to them over the past 3 years. They had been trained in secret by human military advisors who had taught them how to fight. The Vraxian garrison on Kellara numbered 3,000 soldiers. They expected to crush the rebellion easily, as they had crushed previous uprisings. But this time was different. The Kellari fighters used tactics they had learned from humans. They struck at night, targeting the Vraxian supply depots and communication stations. They disappeared before the Vraxian soldiers could respond. Within a week, the Vraxian garrison was surrounded and cut off from support. The commander sent desperate messages asking for help, but the Vraxian fleets were too busy dealing with other rebellions on other worlds. Similar uprisings began on 12 more worlds. The subject species that humanity had been secretly supporting all rose at the same time. Each rebellion was carefully coordinated with the others. When Vraxian forces moved to crush one uprising, another would erupt behind them. The Vraxian High Command realized they were facing a catastrophe. This was not random chaos. This was a planned campaign, and humanity was behind all of it. Fleet Commander Krenthox, the one who had destroyed Kepler Station, was given emergency authority to mobilize every available ship and crush the rebellions. He assembled the largest Vraxian battle fleet in 50 years, 200 warships, including the pride of the Vraxian Navy, the dreadnought Emperor's Wrath. Krenthox was confident. Yes, the humans had won one battle through tricks and deception, but now he would bring overwhelming force. The humans could not hide their tricks when facing this much firepower. He led his fleet to the Kellara system, planning to make an example of the rebellious world. He would destroy the Kellari rebels and any humans helping them. He would show the galaxy that the Vraxian Empire was still the supreme power. But when his fleet arrived at Kellara, they found the human fleet waiting for them. General Marcus Webb commanded the human forces from his flagship, the UENS Remembrance. He watched the Vraxian fleet approach on his tactical displays. 200 Vraxian ships against 80 human vessels. The Vraxians probably thought they had an overwhelming advantage. They were wrong. All ships, execute Plan Kepler, Webb ordered calmly. The human fleet split into small groups, each group targeting a specific Vraxian ship. They moved with perfect coordination, their artificial intelligence systems allowing them to react faster than any organic crew could. They used the asteroids and debris in the system for cover, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The Vraxian ships fired their massive weapons, but they were too slow. The weapons were designed to destroy other massive warships in traditional battles. They were not designed to hit small, fast-moving targets. Meanwhile, the human missiles found their targets with devastating accuracy. The humans had studied every class of Vraxian warship. They knew exactly where the armor was weakest, where the critical systems were located, how to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. Krenthox watched in growing horror as his fleet was torn apart. His ships were larger. His weapons were more powerful. But it did not matter. The humans were simply better at this. They had planned every move. They had prepared for every possibility. The Emperor's Wrath, the greatest ship in the Vraxian fleet, was hit by a concentrated missile strike that destroyed its main reactor. The ship went dark and began to drift. Krenthox, standing on the bridge, felt the artificial gravity fail. He floated helplessly in the darkness, listening to the screams of his crew. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Vraxian fleet was destroyed. Some ships had been blown apart. Others were captured by human boarding parties. A few managed to escape and flee to other systems. General Webb sent a message to all the surviving Vraxian crews. It was broadcast on all frequencies so that everyone in the galaxy could hear it. 3 years ago, you destroyed Kepler Station and killed 26,000 innocent people. You thought we would forget. You thought we would accept the Council's apology and move on. You were wrong. Humanity does not forget. And we do not forgive those who murder our children. Across the galaxy, species who had been oppressed by the elder races heard those words and felt something they had not felt in a long time. Hope. The balance of power was shifting, and the age of impunity for the strong was ending. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. The massive chamber, built thousands of years ago, had seen many crises, but the representatives gathering now carried an atmosphere of fear that had not been felt in centuries. The council consisted of 20 species, representing the most powerful civilizations in known space. The Vraxians held 3 seats due to their military strength. The Telkari held 2 seats due to their economic influence. The other races each held 1 seat. Their power carefully balanced by ancient treaties and agreements. High Speaker Teleron, a Telkari with silver scales and 12 fingers, called the session to order. His voice carried through the chamber with authority that came from leading the council for 30 years. We are here to address the conflict between the Vraxian Empire and humanity, he began. This war threatens the stability that has maintained galactic peace for a millennium. We must broker a ceasefire immediately. The Vraxian representative, Governor Thexlan, stood with difficulty. He was old, and the news from the front had aged him further. Half the Vraxian fleet was gone. 12 conquered worlds had declared independence. The Vraxian economy was collapsing as trade routes were cut and resources stopped flowing. The humans must be stopped, Thexlan said, his 4 eyes blazing with anger. They have violated every principle of civilized warfare. They use deception and trickery. They arm primitive species and incite rebellion. They spread lies and propaganda. This is not how wars are fought among the elder races. High Speaker Teleron nodded sympathetically. The Council will send mediators to Earth. We will offer humanity concessions. Greater representation in the Council, perhaps. Economic benefits. Territory. Whatever they want, within reason. In exchange, they must cease hostilities and accept a return to the established order. But before the vote could be called, the chamber's main screen activated without anyone touching the controls. A human woman's face appeared, life-sized and crystal clear. She was perhaps 60 years old, with gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that had seen too much suffering. I apologize for the interruption, she said calmly. My name is Ambassador Jennifer Park. I am humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, though I was not invited to this session. I wanted to address some misconceptions before you make your decision. High Speaker Teleron stood in shock. How did you access this system? This is a secure council meeting. Ambassador Park smiled slightly. If we can infiltrate the Vraxian military networks, accessing your conference systems is quite simple. But please, let me speak. What I have to say affects all of you. She pressed something off-screen, and the display changed. Documents and video recordings began appearing alongside her image. The Council has framed this as a simple territorial war between humanity and the Vraxian Empire. You want to broker peace and return to normal. But this is not a territorial war. This is a war about whether the strong can murder the weak with impunity. New images appeared. They showed the destruction of Kepler Station. Bodies floating in space. Children's faces frozen in death. The council members looked away, uncomfortable. 3 years ago, the Vraxians destroyed our station and killed 26,000 people. The council called it an unfortunate accident. But we have spent 3 years investigating. We have evidence now that you did not see then. The documents showed sensor readings and communication intercepts. Park explained in clear, simple language how the Vraxian fleet had deliberately targeted Kepler Station, how Admiral Krenthox had ignored their pleas for time to evacuate, how the Vraxians had shot down escape pods carrying fleeing civilians. This was not an accident, Park said quietly. This was murder. And the Council allowed it because the Vraxians are strong, and we were weak. Governor Thexlan stood up angrily. These are lies. Fabrications designed to justify human aggression. Park ignored him. But that is not all. During our investigation, we found something else. Evidence of 17 other incidents where the Vraxians destroyed civilian targets belonging to minor species. Incidents the Council never investigated because the victims were not important enough. New documents appeared, each one showing a different massacre. A Kelari colony ship destroyed with 3,000 civilians aboard. A Bendix research station attacked without warning. A Morsith trading fleet obliterated in neutral space. Incident after incident. Stretching back decades. The council chamber fell silent. The representatives looked at the evidence with growing horror. Some of them had known about these incidents. Most had not. All of them had to confront the fact that they had allowed it to happen. Park continued, her voice steady and cold. For 1,000 years, the elder races have maintained peace among yourselves. You have created laws and treaties that protect the strong from each other, but you have created no real protections for the weak. You allow the powerful to abuse the powerless, as long as it does not disturb the balance among equals. She paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity is not fighting this war for revenge, though we are taking revenge. We are fighting to change the system that made Kepler Station possible. We are fighting for every small species that has been stepped on and ignored and told to accept injustice. High Speaker Teleron found his voice. Ambassador Park, the Council understands your anger. We can reform the laws. We can create new protections for civilian populations. But you must end this war. The Vraxians are willing to negotiate. Are they? Park asked. She looked directly at Governor Thexlan. Will the Vraxian Empire agree to face war crimes tribunals for the officers responsible for Kepler Station and the other massacres? Will they accept monitoring of their military to ensure future compliance with civilian protection laws? Will they grant true independence to the species they have conquered? Thexlan's face showed pure rage. The Vraxian Empire will never submit to such humiliation. We are a sovereign power. Grading Vraxin, Park nodded, as if she had expected that answer. Then, the war continues. And let me be clear about something else. Humanity is no longer the weak species that you could ignore or patronize. We have proven that in battle. We have allies now, among dozens of species that you dismissed as unimportant. And we are prepared to fight for as long as it takes. She leaned forward, and her voice became harder. The old order is ending. The age when the strong could do whatever they wanted, with no consequences, is over. You can accept this change and work with us to build something better. Or you can try to maintain the old system and face the consequences. The screen went dark, leaving the council in stunned silence. In the days that followed, the council representatives met in private groups, trying to decide what to do. Some of the elder races wanted to unite against humanity. Seeing them as a threat to the established order, these species began forming defensive alliances and building up their military forces. But others saw opportunity in the chaos. The Bendix, who had lost a research station to Vraxian aggression 30 years ago, quietly sent a diplomatic mission to Earth. The Kelari, newly independent thanks to human support, offered to share their mineral wealth with humanity in exchange for protection guarantees. The Morsith, a merchant species that had always resented the Vraxian control of trade routes, began routing their ships through human-protected space. The economic shift was subtle at first, but it grew quickly. The most significant change came from the Telkari themselves. High Speaker Teleron met privately with Ambassador Park in neutral territory. He was alone, except for his personal guards, which was highly unusual for a council leader. "You have broken something that took 1,000 years to build," he said to her. Park met his eyes steadily. "We have broken something that was already rotten. Now, we can build something better." Teleron was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that would change everything. "The Telkari Confederation will support humanitarian reforms to council law. We will also support the creation of protections for civilian populations and minor species. In exchange, humanity must agree to work within the council system, rather than outside it." "And the Vraxians?" Park asked. "The Vraxians will accept war crimes, tribunals, and military reductions. They have no choice. Their fleet is broken, their economy is collapsing, and their conquered worlds are free. We will help them transition to a reduced but stable state." Park considered this carefully. "We want guarantees. Real enforcement mechanisms. Not just pretty words in a treaty that gets ignored when convenient. You will have them," Teleron promised. "Because the alternative is watching this war spread until it consumes the entire galaxy. You have shown us that the old balance is gone. Now, we must create a new one." They shook hands, the human gesture looking strange with Teleron's 12 fingers but meaningful nonetheless. The war was not over yet, but the path to its end had appeared. Back on Earth, General Webb received the news of the diplomatic progress. He stood in his bunker command center, surrounded by the tactical displays that had guided the war. For the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to feel something other than cold determination. "They're listening now," Major Torres said beside him. "We made them listen." Webb nodded slowly. "Yes, but we paid a terrible price to teach that lesson. 26,000 dead at Kepler Station, 3,000 military casualties in the war. Was it worth it?" Torres looked at the displays showing the newly independent worlds where species were celebrating their freedom. "Ask the Kelari. Ask the Bendix. Ask all the species who are free now, because we fought. They'll tell you it was worth it." Webb hoped she was right. He hoped that the galaxy they were building would be better than the one they had torn down. Because if it was not, then all the death and suffering would have been for nothing. 2 years after the Battle of Kelara, Ambassador Jennifer Park stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers. The building looked much the same as before, but everything else had changed. The council now had 35 seats instead of 20. The Vraxian Empire, reduced and reformed, held only 1 seat. The newly independent Kelari held a seat. So did the Bendix, the Morsith, and 12 other species that had been considered too small or too weak to matter before the war. Today was the day of the final vote on the new Galactic Compact, a document that had taken 18 months to write and negotiate. Park had read every word of it dozens of times. She had fought for each protection, each guarantee, each enforcement mechanism. High Speaker Teleron, still leading the council despite everything that had changed, called the session to order. His silver scales were duller now. Leading the galaxy through this transformation had exhausted him, but his voice remained strong. "We gather today to vote on the new Galactic Compact," he announced. "This document represents the most fundamental change to galactic governance in 1,000 years. It establishes protections for civilian populations during conflicts. It creates enforcement mechanisms for war crimes. It guarantees the rights of minor species to self-determination. And it reforms the Council itself to ensure all voices are heard." The vote was not unanimous, but it passed with an overwhelming majority. 28 seats voted in favor. Only 7 voted against. Mostly elder races who still resented the loss of their absolute authority. When the vote was announced, Park felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was done. The system had changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to matter. After the session, she walked through the corridors of the council building. The walls displayed historical images from the past 1,000 years of galactic civilization. Soon, she thought, they would add images from the recent war. Images of Kepler Station's destruction. Images of the Battle of Kellara. Images of the signing of the new compact. A voice called her name. She turned to find Governor Thexlan, the Vraxian representative, approaching slowly. He looked old and tired. The war had destroyed his empire and his career. He would probably be the last Vraxian governor to serve on the council with any real power. "Ambassador Park," he said formally. "May I speak with you?" Park nodded, though she remained cautious. "Of course, Governor." They found a quiet observation room overlooking the planet below. "My people hate me now," he said quietly. "They say I surrendered too easily. They say I should have fought to the last ship. But I saw what your species is capable of. I saw how thoroughly you planned everything. If we had continued fighting, the Vraxian Empire would not exist at all today." Park said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I wanted to ask you something," Thexlan said. "Something I do not understand. When you defeated our fleets, you could have destroyed us completely. You could have done to us what we did to Kepler Station. But you did not. Why?" Park considered her answer carefully. "Because we are not you. We did not fight this war to commit genocide. We fought to change a system that allowed innocent people to die with no consequences. If we had destroyed the Vraxian people, we would have become the very thing we were fighting against. But you do not forgive us," Thexlan said. "It was not a question." "No," Park agreed. "We do not forgive. Admiral Krenthox is on trial for war crimes right now, as are 17 other Vraxian officers. They will be punished for what they did. That is justice. But justice is not the same as revenge. We do not punish the Vraxian people for the crimes of their leaders." Thexlan turned to look at her with his 4 yellow eyes. "Your species is strange to us. You have such capacity for violence, but also for mercy. You remember every wrong done to you, but you also know when to stop fighting. We thought you were simple and emotional. We were wrong." "Yes, you were," Park said simply. After Thexlan left, Park remained in the observation room. She thought about the past 5 years. The horror of Kepler Station, the long years of preparation, the battles, and the negotiations. The thousands who had died to reach this moment. Her communicator beeped. It was a message from Earth. The memorial for Kepler Station was being dedicated today. They wanted to know if she had any words to say to the survivors and the families of the dead. Park recorded a short message. "We promised we would never forget. We promised that their deaths would mean something. Today, with the passage of the new Galactic Compact, that promise is fulfilled. The system that allowed Kepler Station to happen is gone. It is not perfect. It will never bring back those we lost. But it is better. And we will continue to make it better, for as long as it takes." On Earth, in the rebuilt Kepler Station that now orbited Mars, The survivors gathered for the dedication ceremony. The new station was larger and more beautiful than the old one. At its center was a memorial wall, with 30,000 names carved in stone. The names of everyone who had died 5 years ago. General Marcus Webb stood before the memorial with his senior staff. He had retired from active service after the war ended, but he had accepted the invitation to speak at the dedication. "We often talk about why we fought this war," he said to the assembled crowd. "We talk about justice and systemic change and protecting the weak. All of that is true, but at its heart, this war was about something simpler. It was about saying that human lives matter, that our children matter, that when someone kills us, there will be consequences." He touched one name on the memorial wall, Captain Sarah Chen, who had stayed on the station until the end to help others escape. "We won this war," Webb continued. "But victory does not bring back the dead. It does not heal all wounds. What it does do is ensure that their deaths were not meaningless. We changed the galaxy because of what happened here. That is the only justice we could give them." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. 30,000 names, 30,000 lives. The price humanity had paid to earn its place among the stars. Across the galaxy, the changes continued. The Vraxian war crimes tribunals proceeded, bringing justice to those responsible for decades of atrocities. The newly independent worlds began rebuilding, supported by human aid and technology. The Council reformed itself, slowly learning to function with so many new voices and perspectives. But perhaps the most significant change was in how species viewed each other. The elder races, who had thought themselves superior for so long, now had to accept that they could be challenged and defeated. The minor species, who had thought themselves powerless, now knew they could change their circumstances if they worked together. 3 years after the dedication of the new Kepler station, Park returned to Earth for the first time since the war ended. She had spent those years on the Council, fighting for every reform and improvement, making sure the new compact was actually enforced rather than ignored. She visited the War Memorial in Geneva, where the names of the 3,000 human soldiers who had died in the conflict were recorded. She visited the Diplomatic Academy, where young humans were being trained to represent humanity in the complex galactic system. She visited schools, where children learned about what had happened and why it mattered. At one school, a young girl asked her a question that stayed with Park for a long time afterward. "Ambassador Park, was it worth it? All the fighting and dying, was it worth it to change the rules?" Park thought about the Kellery children who could grow up free instead of enslaved. She thought about the Bendix researchers who could pursue their work without fear of random violence. She thought about all the species who now had rights and protections they had never had before. "I cannot answer that for everyone," Park told the girl honestly. "The people who died at Kepler Station cannot tell us if it was worth it. The soldiers who died in battle cannot tell us. But I can tell you this. We chose to fight not because we wanted revenge, but because we believed the galaxy could be better. And now, it is better. Imperfect, still unjust in many ways, but better. That has to count for something." On the Vraxian homeworld, in a small apartment far from the centers of power, Admiral Krenthox sat in a cell awaiting his sentence. The War Crimes Tribunal had found him guilty on all counts. He would spend the rest of his life in prison, probably on a human-administered facility. He thought often about the humans he had dismissed as weak and unimportant. He had learned more about them during his trial. He had learned about their history, full of terrible wars and unimaginable suffering. He had learned about their capacity to endure and their refusal to forget. The humans had a phrase they used, "never again." They said it about their own genocides and massacres. They said it about horrors from their past. And when Krenthox destroyed Kepler Station, he had given them a new reason to say it. He understood now what he had done. He had not just killed 30,000 people. He had awakened something in humanity that would not go back to sleep. A determination to ensure that such things never happened again. Not to humans and not to anyone else. The galaxy would never be the same. The old order, where the strong ruled with impunity and the weak suffered in silence, was gone forever. In its place was something new and uncertain, but with the possibility of justice. Back on the observation deck of the council building, Park stood looking at the stars. Somewhere out there was the debris field that had once been the original Kepler station. The bodies had been recovered and buried, but the wreckage remained, a monument to what had happened. A young Kellery diplomat approached her, moving with the graceful gait of his species. His name was Renthor, and he represented his people on the council. "Ambassador Park," he said respectfully, "I wanted to thank you. My grandmother was a slave in the mines before your people helped us fight for freedom. She died before seeing independence. But her children are free. That is because of you." Quote, Park shook her head. "It is because of all of us. Humanity did not free anyone alone. We just helped you free yourselves." "Perhaps," Renthor said. "But you paid a terrible price to teach the galaxy that the weak deserve justice too. My people will never forget that." Park smiled sadly. "Neither will we. Humanity never forgets. That is both our strength and our curse." She turned back to the stars, thinking about everything that had changed and everything that remained to be done. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. Nations that had seemed eternal had fallen or transformed. New alliances had formed. New possibilities had emerged. And somewhere in human space, a new generation was growing up knowing that their species had faced annihilation and responded by changing the entire galaxy. They would carry that knowledge forward. That understanding that humanity could be pushed, could be hurt, could suffer terrible losses, but would never simply accept injustice. The Vraxians had thought humanity would forget. They had thought humans would accept their place and move on. They were wrong. Humanity never forgets a strike. And their revenge had indeed tilted the balance of nations, not through simple destruction, but through the will to make the galaxy into something better than it had been. The old order was gone. The new order was still being written. And humanity would help write it. One word, one law, one reform at a time, for as long as it took to build a galaxy where no one would ever again have to watch their children die in the cold dark of space with no hope of justice.